Arch Linux. Let's get under the hood.
In February 2026, a Windows update wiped the Arch Linux boot entry from a dual-boot computer. Recovery meant booting a separate drive, entering the broken system from outside, and reinstalling the bootloader by hand. The same thing happened in July 2024. It will happen again. In January 2026, the package manager refused to update anything until cryptographic keys were manually repaired. In June 2025, a routine kernel update produced a panic on a gaming laptop. Arch Linux has been exactly what it is since 2002. The documentation is considered the best in Linux by users of every distribution. The community repository has over 80,000 packages. And when something breaks, the path back is always the same: a separate boot drive and the knowledge to use it. Judd Vini released Arch Linux on March 11, 2002. He was a French-Canadian developer inspired by Crux, a Linux distribution so minimal it barely existed. The philosophy had one word: keep it simple. In Arch's context, that means provide a minimal clean base, do not make decisions for the user, do not add tools that hide what is happening underneath, and trust that the user can read documentation and configure their own system. That is a philosophy, not an accident. Every distinctive feature of Arch flows directly from it. The blank base install, the manual configuration, the wiki as the primary support mechanism. The system provides a minimal base. The user decides everything else. There is no default desktop environment. There are no mystery services running in the background. There are no opinionated tools hiding what the operating system is doing underneath. You install a base system. You add what you want. You configure everything yourself. You read the documentation when you need help. Vinet handed leadership to Aaron Griffin in October 2007. The project has continued with a rotating set of developers and community maintainers ever since. There is no corporate sponsor, there is no company behind Arch Linux. It is community maintained by volunteers who believe the philosophy is worth preserving. In 2022, the trusted user role was renamed to package maintainer, a terminology change that reflected how the community had evolved without changing what the role actually involved. The installer has evolved without compromising the principle. Since 2021, the official installation media ships with ArcInstall, a guided installer that reduces the number of manual commands required without changing what Arch is underneath. It lowers the barrier to entry for new users. It does not change the philosophy. You still get a rolling release, minimal base system that you are responsible for maintaining. The difference is that you no longer need to type 40 commands from memory to get there. The Arch Wiki is the single most valuable piece of documentation in the Linux ecosystem. Users of Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, NixOS, and OpenSUSE all consult it. It is not written to be friendly, it is written to be accurate. The contributors are technically sophisticated users who understand how the underlying systems work and update the documentation when things change. For someone comfortable with Linux fundamentals, it is the most reliable reference available for any distribution. The community repository has over 80,000 user-submitted build recipes covering virtually any software in the Linux ecosystem. When the official package collection does not include something, the community repository almost certainly does. The trade-off is that these packages are not officially supported. When system libraries update, community packages that depend on them can break until the maintainer catches up. You accepted that risk when you installed them. That is by design. The rolling release model is why Arch dominates Linux gaming. Your kernel is current. Your graphics drivers are current. Your compatibility layer for running Windows games is current. When new hardware comes out, Arch users have the driver support first because the packages track upstream releases closely. The package manager itself is fast, simple, and stays out of your way. Dependency resolution is clean. Transactions are predictable. It does what you ask without adding complexity you did not request. But the rolling release is also why Arch requires regular attention. Packages move constantly. The project publishes news that should be read before major updates. Systems left without updates for months develop a gap between installed versions and current repository versions that makes the next update complicated. The rule is simple and absolute. Never update some packages without updating all of them. Violating that rule produces broken systems with mismatched dependencies that require manual recovery. The absence of a built-in rollback mechanism is the most significant gap compared to NixOS and OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. When a kernel update breaks the boot process on Arch, the path back is a separate boot drive and manual recovery. NixOS lets you select a previous working system from the boot menu. OpenSUSE Tumbleweed with file system snapshots does the same. Arch offers nothing equivalent out of the box. You can add snapshot support separately through specific file system choices, but it is not the default and requires configuration that the installer does not set up for you. The bootloader fragility on dual boot systems is a recurring pattern rather than a one-off failure. Windows treats its own bootloader as authoritative during updates and can overwrite the boot entries that other operating systems depend on. Distributions like Ubuntu and Fedora set up more defensive configurations during installation. Arch users who configure their own bootloader bear the consequences when that configuration is overwritten. The fix works. The knowledge required to apply it is not trivial. The package manager Keyring problem catches users who do not update regularly. The cryptographic keys used to verify packages expire or rotate. A system that has not been updated for months may find that none of its keys are valid, and the package manager refuses to install anything until the keyring is refreshed first. For someone returning to an Arch system after a long absence, the first thing they need to fix is the thing that lets them fix everything else. The community repository adds another layer of fragility. 80,000 packages maintained by individual volunteers. When official system libraries update, community packages that depend on those libraries can break silently. The maintainer may not update promptly. The package may be abandoned entirely. You installed it knowing this. The official project does not support community packages and will not help you fix them. Arch Linux is the distribution that teaches you Linux, not by explaining things gently, but by making you responsible for every decision and giving you the best documentation in the ecosystem to learn from. When something breaks on Arch, you understand exactly why it broke because you configured the thing that failed. That understanding is the product. The system is the mechanism for acquiring it. The community describes it as the least conceptually strange path to a capable Linux setup. NixOS requires you to think about your system in a completely different way. Arch requires you to do everything yourself, but the everything is conventional Linux. The skills you build on Arch transfer to any other Linux system. The skills you build on NixOS transfer to NixOS. Arch does not break as often as its reputation suggests, but when it breaks, the recovery requires fundamentals that users of more managed distributions never needed to learn. A separate boot drive, the ability to enter a broken system from outside, the knowledge to rebuild a bootloader or regenerate the files that the kernel needs to find your storage. The documentation for all of it is in the wiki. The wiki is excellent. You still need to know how to use it. 23 years after Judd Vinay released version 0.1, Arch Linux is still exactly what it was designed to be. A minimal base that trusts you to build the rest. The meme says it. I use Arch, by the way. It is also an accurate description of a distribution that has rewarded the investment it demands for 23 years.